First of all, I would like to say good evening, lecturer and all my classmates. My name is Bukamika, and today I'm gonna do a presentation about democratization in Pacific Asia, in case Japan. And now let's move to my content. I have 7 contents. That the first is when democracy become in Asia. Democratic institution and political structure, development and democracy, the problem of liberal democracy, the politics of human rights, conclusions, and the end is difference. And about the first content, it's about when democracy becomes in Asia. There are 4 points, but in here I raise 2 points and then we can move to the next. But the first is the persistent dominance of traditional or public, the persistent dominance of traditional forms of public authority prevented democracy from developing in many countries. Contrast military intervention in politics and prolonged control of the state by the military leave little room of democratic institutions to develop. The second point, when it's becoming Asia, the prevalence of traditional social structure and values. The prevalence of traditional social structure and values delay the rise of democratic institutions. These structure and value were closely associated with the early state of development in these countries. Do development come before democracy? Even with significant process in economic development, democracy still did not arrive as expected by many. And for the third point, democratic institution in place. It's mean the underlying social structure governed by the descriptive values of traditional forces make the political system with democratic only the surface. Behind the democratic institutions, elections, party systems, constitutional order, citizens, and so on, they are clearly heretical, ballistic, political order and the top-down and corporatist political processes. And the fourth is democracy, old and new. It's referred to the state. State institutions are not always in embodiment of democratic values. Public office can be corrupt. Votes can be purchased. Elections are not about issue politics, but more about personal relation. All these are important except of all the called Asian democracy. After an Asian democracy would have all the institutions of democracy elections, multi-party constitution, rule of the law, and so on, but institutions were often subject to the broad economic and social agendas as claimed by the dominant political forces, which is typically embrace stability order the priority. The consequence political order was therefore anything but a liberal democracy. And now let's move to the democratic structure and democratic institution and political structure. There are only 2 points that is about the Asia democracy. Asia democracy is a unique set of political the value found in Pacific Asia countries resulting for the shaping of democratic institutions and values by the traditional structure uh, as well as temporary conditional of political economics in these countries. About the political structure with deliberative democracy is critical of existing liberal democracy arrangement because the latter do not sufficiently address with the problem of pluralism, inequality, and complexity that are characteristic of modern Western societies. Unlike liberal democracy, deliberative democracy does not just rely upon the aggregation of preference and majority voting by the giving priority to res, respond, argument, and discuss. Liberative democracy enables interests to be recognized, but it does not permit them to dominate proceedings. And now let's move to the government of Japan. That kind of the structure, how the Japan government control the state or control the nation or judged by code. So as you can see, the Prime Minister, Ministry of State, they are the government or the Prime Minister who cover the state, and people vote to the nation directly by House of Inspection or House of Council. And then it's all the people vote, it will count, and then it will move to choose the Prime Minister. And as you can see, the symbol of the state and of the unity of the people, it's also moved to the Ministry of State after they vote. Yes. And now let's move to development and democracy. Japanese people developed the democracy by democratic institutions are necessary for economics development because non-democratic regimes tend to corrupt and concern with accumulation of wealth for themselves rather than for the people and society. Non-democratic regimes is not able to properly represent a vast gain of social interest in their decision-making process and thus ill-equal and recognize economic development on the mass scale. Non-democratic regime has limited. It have limit space for civil liberty and individual freedom and do not respect individual property rights. Such regimes therefore are incompatible with the market economics with concern on private ownership and individual entrepreneurship. In short, getting the constitution right. For more on this is crucial for economics development. And now let's move to the relative democracy in Japan. And here is the short one that make it easy for you that liberalism in Japan, there are 4 parts. They separate and such as with uniformity and modus vivendi. With the uniformity, Uniformity, it has homogeneous, elliptics, modern, and homogeneous published modern. About the modus vivendi, it's have 2 points, that is heterogeneous elliptics modern and heterogeneous published modern. Okay, then now let's move to the next point. It's about the problem of illiberal democracy. As you can see, the democracy of Japan, there are 4, and now it's a problem like the first is the non-natural. Its understanding of the state that government may justifiably intervene the most, if not its except in social life or other promote or physically determine conception of the public goods. The second is revolution of rationalistic. It's uh, it's about the manage of developing state as corporate enterprise. And the last is the development of managed. It's rather than the critical public space and civil society, liberal Asian political system will most likely not accept individual rights and liberty when these conflict with the collective arms articulated by state and economics managers. This form of government in their views constitutes a unique Asian response to the complexity produced by modernization. And now let's move to politics and human rights. There are main points with the human rights in Japan of politicals, democratic political dimension. Pacific Asian countries first long rule under various Cold War regime in which human rights were suppressed, marginalized, and ignored. Economics and social development, political liberalization, and democratic transition in driven delays that has brought the issue of human rights to top of the political agenda. And about the human right in economics and social rights, it can be separated from political and civil rights. Such as in Bangkok Declaration, stress is independence is individual of economic, society, culture, uh, civil and political rights, and the inherent interrelationship between uh, development, democracy, universal enjoyment of all human rights, and social justice, which must be addressed in the integrated and balanced manner. We can say more precisely as James Town notes, Pacific Asia countries, mainly that previously developed Asia societies, has been eradication of poverty. And in Japan and even in Thailand, it has the same political of human rights. About the conclusion is to sum up the topic, the democratization in Pacific Asia, in case Japan again, like the democracy become in Asia, it's in 1994, or some authors said 1968, focus on the rule of regional and centralized bureaucracy to provide the effective and affections, management of my society, and the securation of politics, and that legitimize state power on the worldly basis. The way how to develop political efficiency, economic development bring the better political communication and education among the citizens, more mobile way of life, and the caste system of rewarding people by what they work or what they do rather than who they are. All this fit over into the political culture and political behavior of modernized people, resulting in their clamoring of subsistence rule in politics and public affairs. At the end, challenge the economics right first resist Kenneth Christie and Daniel accused that human rights, democracy, and economics develop separate with distant categories, but rather are increasingly linked. What is interesting in the use of King Age of Warren's author trend, which is to justify, promote, and countries, politics, and control uh, repercussions within such a geopolitical framework. And here is the reference that you can go through and get more information, such as the Pacification Code of Democracy, Japan, and Southwest Asia. It's kind of comparing and the democratization and the process of participatory regionalism in Asia. Yes, and that's it for my presentation. Thank you, lecturer.